Moved by Featherstone, second by Corbett. The Corporation Service Committee reconvenes to open session at
8:18.
8:18. Having received solicitor advice on draft bylaw, all in favor? Carried. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining the corporate service meeting for July 30th, 2024. We've just concluded our closed session to review legal advice on short-term rental bylaw. We will now move to agenda item 7. The committee will discuss the draft short-term rental bylaw.
Okay, so we have the bylaw. Everyone has something the bylaw. I'll start going through that. Based on some of the points that we've had listed out. It says page 19 on my side because it was part of another.
Yeah, probably all wrong now.
Yeah.
Mine's 19.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so
That's fine.
and some of them I'll skip over because they're also, we can talk about them somewhere else as well, because there's other components of it in here. So the first one is that no person shall use or operate any short-term rental premises on any commercial activity, for any commercial activity other than the operation of a short-term rental. No short-term rental shall be used for the purpose of hosting any type of special event, which may include but not be limited to a wedding, pre-wedding party, or fundraising event. This speaks to assembly occupancy, so we are licensing based on a residential use. And if there is a function, we're only licensed for the residential use. We're not licensing for an assembly occupancy, and that's a different section of the codes. So we're saying no, that can't happen. It does mean that, you know, on a short-term rental, they can't have a wedding, but the neighbor could have a wedding. But that neighbor is taking the onus on their own property. So like a house is not, and the septic is not meant for 100 guests every weekend for at a short-term rental or every other weekend, right? So, and we can't control that once it's licensed.
And like if it was at your own house, you would only probably have one wedding for one kid.
Right.
As opposed to
Right.
using your short-term rental facility for weddings every weekend.
So that's what those provisions were for. Can't operate in contravention of the site plan and the floor plan that's been approved by the assured. This goes and it goes to the guest room on the 2.10 as well. That was identified and approved by the application of short-term rental. So the site plan, when someone comes in for a short-term rental and they bring us the application, maybe include the site plan of what that house is. And then these will ensure, by stating it here, it's ensuring that the house is only used on the site plan and what the house has been approved for, whether it's been septic or anything else that we have. So it's just being used for those dwelling, for those purposes, sorry. No person shall violate the provisions of the short-term rental code of conduct. This just gives us the meat and potatoes to actually do enforcement. No guest shall remove the list of information required to be posted. So there is a list in our bylaw of information that has to be posted. So it's saying no guest can remove that. And if it is removed, it's on the onus of the owner of the property to make sure it's posted for the next rental. And then no person will be permitted to operate more than one short-term rental premises on one property or at one time. So I think that we've heard from some of the conversations that a residential use and a short-term use is still a residential use, and feel free to jump in, but it's still a residential use. So we're not changing the use of the property. It changes if it becomes into a commercial and it's not used, if the premise is not used as a residential. That's when the courts have started to look at whether it's commercial or not. But if it's a residential use and it can be, I mean, grandfather is just a word, but if you're using it today as a short-term rental, is a residential use property, it's a short-term rental, and then tomorrow we pass a bylaw with the regulations then anyone who was operating and can prove it with receipts, with, advertisements, posters, that what they've done to rent it out, then that can become grandfathered in. And as long as they meet the rules of the bylaw that we pass the next day, then they will get a license. So we can't refuse them based on the use. They still have to meet all the rules though.
So it's, sorry,
Go ahead.
so it's a maximum of 50 unless you have been operating previously. Let's say we have 63
Right, okay,
operating currently, and they can prove it. We will license as long as they're all in compliance, 63.
Yeah.
Moving forward. We can still cap at 50, and as people move on and no longer do short-term rentals, we wait until we get to 50.
Mhm.
And then we can start adding new after we're under 50, is that
yes,
right? So if you're currently
understand.
operating one and you adhere to all the rules, you're able to continue to operate one.
yes.
So there's no cap.
Well, we could still cap Jason was saying, we can still cap at the 50. But we can't refuse anyone who is doing, or we should not refuse anyone who is currently acting and can prove that they are operating a short-term rental. Based on residential use.
But if they say grandfathered in and we have 50 people. Then that's it for the year, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the bylaw currently is at 50.
So as a
So-
one-time, as a
Yeah.
one-time deal, as we transition into this new bylaw, if there's more than 50 currently operating that want to continue to operate and comply with all of the rules, we will allow on a one-time basis or like more than 50 up until those start falling off and the ones that were grandfathered move on and don't want to do short-term rentals anymore.
Or if we revisit it, we up the number, like.
Yeah, we can do that too, for sure.
So
Yeah,
if we
possible.
grandfathered 50 people in, what about new people?
Not available. Not available.
It just ensures whoever's operating now can still operate as the grandfather.
What if I wanted to have a short-term rental and there's already 50 people there?
There is a provision for a waiting list.
And what's going to eliminate that one to let me get back on the list?
A sale of the property, or they don't do it anymore, or council decides to revisit the.
Or,
project.
yeah, like Steve said, or they don't meet the requirements and they can't meet the requirements.
It's kind of a test.
Because we're gonna inspect up to three times, and if you can't meet the requirements, then you have to try again next year.
Well, and probably 50 is a good safe number anyways, but I'm just saying, I'm asking the question before,
Right.
not after.
Yeah.
We also have to protect our housing stock as well. As well as all of the province of Ontario is trying to do. So the capping is trying to, still permit the short-term rental, the tourist attraction, the economic development. But at the same time, still have residential dwellings being used within the municipality that people can enjoy and live in.
Yeah, because some people would buy it and possibly that's money to pay the mortgage or whatever.
Right.
So,
As opposed to numbered companies could possibly come in and purchase most of your shoreline dwellings. And that would, to me, is a commercial use as opposed to residential use. We don't want that to happen. We would rather our citizens operate short-term rentals instead of numbered companies doing that.
so who gets first choice?
Grandfathered,
Grandfather?
yes.
And then individuals or corporations, or is there no difference if a corporation comes now, then they go in ahead of the individuals, right?
Our current bylaw is written. However, it's not a past bylaw, it's a draft bylaw. We have to remember that, and we're here to hear public consultation and still work on our bylaw. But currently, what we've drafted, it's so a principal dwelling gets first dibs. So if you have a short-term rental. For instance, my mother-in-law has one in her basement. She lives upstairs. She has the principal dwelling, so she's there managing the people, etc. So that would be a principal dwelling. They get first dibs. The next one is they get the chance if it's you're not there to manage the property. So that would be outside of being a principal dwelling. So for like a seasonal dwelling or a cottage, something to that effect, you get the next chance. The last chance is given to the commercial numbered companies.
I'm not getting one anyway.
And how much of this, so from our research, how many do we think we have in the municipality?
When we were at town hall, it was around 36.
So really, probably this is a bit of a, yeah, it's quite a few, but hopefully, like, it might be a moot point. Like, I mean, if we cap out at 36, it leaves the room for 14 more.
Right.
It's kind of difficult because you have to like, when you're on the sites. You may be trying to, like, if you put flexible, I want it for a week or whatever, well, maybe there isn't a week to rent, like, you're not gonna be able to capture everything in one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
And we might end up with 63, even though we cap it at 50 because we have 63. So it doesn't super matter how many we currently have.
I think the other important that we haven't discussed in this part is that if short-term rentals premises on one property or at one at a time. So there's only one person can only own one short-term rental at a time. That's important as well. Again, it's about protecting that the character of the neighborhood. So, and making sure that we do have the housing stock and that people are not just purchasing the properties just to have a
Sure.
it still has to be based on residential, that's how it's grandfathered in, it's a residential use. If you're buying a property solely to rent out for short-term rentals, then that's where we're seeing where the fourth is kind of going to, it's more of a commercial use as opposed to a residential use.
So if I use me as an example, I have my current house. If I bought a second house and wanted to rent it out, I can rent my current one and Jason's gonna apply for license. And then the second one, Nancy, my wife, is gonna apply for the license on the second one, and that's permitted.
Yes.
Okay.
Our bylaw does not consider that.
But you're also, you're held to 150 days also, right? Like
Right.
rent that out.
Yes, if you were buying the second house, the draft does cap at 150 days
That you
A
can
year.
rent it out.
a year that you can rent it out.
Right,
And then
And
the
that really is
commercial,
about. The 150 days applies to all short-term rentals.
commercial is 150 as well?
Yeah.
That's only half a year.
Mhm.
The other half is,
So the
You gotta live in
commercial-
yeah, well, that's, what am I gonna do with my house? The other half?
so,
Hopefully you live in it.
yeah, I would assume that I have my house now. If we buy a summer property or a house on the lake. I could rent part of mine, or I could be licensed, Nancy could have the license for the second one. But we're still using it, like, well, we potentially, or else we'd be spending an awful lot of money for 150 days.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
Two, on the next page, the owner and and operator of a short-term rental shall restrict the occupancy of the premises to a maximum of 2 persons per guest room. And a maximum of 10 guests will be permitted to occupy a short-term rental at once. And children under 2 will not be counted in occupancy. This speaks to some of the building code, and Mike is still here, he can help on this one. So. If your house has been built and it has 5 bedrooms, 2 people per bedroom. And your septic, everything has been approved at that level, then absolutely up to 10 people at a property at a time. But if you're renting out, and this just speaks to some, just rent out just a room. So if you have, if you're renting by the room and you have 4 bedrooms, that would be okay, because you can rent 2 per person, it's 8 people maximum. If you rent by the room, once you get above 4 rooms, it becomes a different classification in the building code for rooming houses. And then that's a whole different bailiwick, and it's not short-term rental anymore. So. That's why this is in here, and it's based more on the 2 persons per guest room, to a maximum of 10. I think I got that right, Mike?
That's correct, yeah.
So the next one was the owner and the operator of a short-term rental shall maintain a minimum of $5 million of commercial general liability insurance per occupancy or per occurrence on the premises. And I think that we've had conversations from the public, and I know that we reached out to a number of insurance companies as well as to Airbnb, and certainly Anne can speak to this. But I'm getting the sense that we want to reduce that down to 2 million. And maybe you can elaborate on the conversation.
We did call several insurance companies. The 5 million is unobtainable basically unless you're a commercial entity. So 2 million. Also, while we're looking at things, Airbnb offers $1 million liability insurance to the host as part of their the fee they pay to Airbnb. They also have $1 million in coverage for theft, destruction of property, etc. through Airbnb, which was pretty cool for Airbnb to put that out there for them. So the $2 million is the norm across most of the municipalities' bylaws as well.
Yeah, this one refers to 5 million of commercial
Yeah,
general liability, so that's not residential.
that's correct.
Right, when we started this bylaw and the research that we had, it was more that short-term rentals are more of a commercial. So since then, with the advice that we've gotten,
Residentially.
keep it a residential use. And that would lower, so 5 million is what you need if it's a commercial, and it's 2 million, but that's not something we need to restrict, but it's 2 million if it's gonna be just a short-term rental on residential.
So just to go back to when I asked the question, how this would affect the municipality, why we would care if there was insurance there. And because it doesn't go loss payable to us or whatever. And I like the answer that Anne had, and if you wouldn't mind repeating that.
The purpose of the liability insurance is because there is no provincial laws on short-term rentals. And the council has the authority to ensure protection for the consumer as well as protection for the renter. Without any provincial laws guiding short-term rentals, the liability insurance is a provision of the bylaws to ensure that the council has done what they could to protect both parties.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So then the next one, well, it speaks into the lapse of the insurance, that they just wouldn't be able to renew their license, but that would come up renewal as well. And then 2.4 is any lapse in nope. 2.5, the owner and the operator of a short-term rental shall provide parking on site in accordance with the parking regulations of the zoning bylaw. And the applicant is required to clearly indicate that the parking spaces will be located on the above approved site plan. So again, there's a section later on that does speak to parking, and it does say, it has to be on a hard surface, it has to be, it can be cobblestone, it can be gravel, but it's wording straight from our zoning bylaw. And it just speaks to the fact that when there are, people or consumers coming up to tourists coming to our area, they may not understand septics and wells, and so but there's no parking on grass. On any of our properties currently, the rule is you can't park on the grass. So it's just stating that in this bylaw as well. Yeah, that was the next section about the hard surface, and so that's wording straight from our zoning bylaw. So it just kind of points it out. 2.27 has a number of things to talk about just in regards to that emergency component that we heard about. So shall ensure the following information is posted on the interior of each short-term rental premises. So these would be some of those things that the owner has to make sure that they have posted within a meter of the entrance so that everybody's aware, kind of like when you go into a hotel and you have the laundry list of things that you're supposed to read. So one of them is that address of the short-term rental, so that when they call 911, it's like right there, it's just handy, they can call. But then there are sections in a municipality on private roads, especially where we have limited services for emergency. So whether the OPP, the ambulance, or the fire can get to them year round. And that was to be posted as well. I think that we've heard that how do we we could do that for a short-term rental, but then there's everybody else on that private road who may not be aware that they're also in limited services. So how do we just make that more encompassing for everybody to understand? So it should, renters should still be made aware that they're on limited services, so they know what they're coming into. But I think that we have to explore what that's going to look like, considering it, there are a lot of new people in our community that maybe they don't know that they're on the private road with limited services as well.
So it's a general knowledge campaign that we're talking
Yes.
about, nothing specifically about this bylaw, just.
Yeah, I think that'll be important.
It's kind of like, you'll see on some of the listings, it'll say, non-accessible by wheelchair. It's in the downstairs, or that way, like if I knew my dad has heart problems, just put it out there. How quickly am I gonna get emergency services, possibly if I stay up?
Right. I mean, I think it's prudent on the owner to ensure that anyway they're renting too. That would be
Understands.
aware, understands that there's a possibility that emergency services might not
Could
make
be
it to
late.
their property, and there'll be lots of renters that won't matter to them, and if it matters to them, then it's important that the renter know.
Yeah, and then 2.2, right, where we have highlighted, just speaks again to that, there's a. Perhaps we could offer a package for each license that can or cannot be used, so with the site plan, again, it's like going into a hotel, you get a binder with all the information about that. That hotel room or the hotel in the area, just making sure that that's there. For the guests. Some I've got my paper a little bit. So 2.29, a person who posts short-term rental listing, this speaks to the designated or the dedicated responsible person, and they shall respond by phone call and or respond to phone calls and or emails and attend the short-term rental premises within 45 minutes. We could look at extending that if we expect them to attend. Or there might be an instance where it might be appropriate to just have that designated person call the renter and say, I just got a complaint about the noise. It's much faster than 45 minutes. And could you please keep it down? And then if there's second complaints, then they can go. So it might be more respond as appropriate. I understand that would be vague.
Who's deeming appropriate?
Yes. So we can extend the 45 minutes to the 60. There are lots of bylaws that have that at 30 minutes as well. But instead of attend, it could be respond by phone call. Or I think that just warrants a conversation on how do we want to manage that. It could be perfectly fine, just that they have to attend within 45 minutes if they get a phone call that there's too much noise.
But if we can say something that respond with a resolution within 30 minutes or attend within 60.
Okay.
Right, I mean, you're right, call and say, hey, listen, keep it down, there's too much noise, problem solved. Or if it's something more serious than that and somebody actually has to go, then let's give them 60 minutes to get there. But it should, for clarity, I just want to make sure, like the responsible person, it says an owner, agent, or dedicated responsible person, so it doesn't actually have to be the owner.
No.
I could be in Hamilton and I decide that oh shoot, I'm gonna be away. I'll just get my buddy GM to be the responsible person who lives in North Bay. As long as that's known and posted.
As long as that number is posted.
Right, it just has to be known and posted, right?
Yeah, our bylaw, because it's essentially operating, and this is where it's kind of all over the place on court. It's residential, but it's still considered a business use under the Freedom of Information, so we can post that designated responsible person, whether it's the owner or someone appointed, an agent. We post that person's name on our website, so that we would have a website, it would be there, so and it's really about, owners should be responsible for what they're doing on their property. So if we have somebody listed, it's don't call the OPP and that costs us money, and don't call our bylaw officer who's not going to work 24/7. But there should be somebody who's responsible for those noise complaints. So we post that on our website so that the neighbors know that they can go there, look at that number, and that's who they're calling to make the first complaint to.
And also, it kind of makes up for Like, so if you're staying in a hotel and you're making noise in your hotel, the OPP doesn't generally show up. Usually the hotel manager
Okay.
comes first and
Yep.
tries to settle things. Also, you know, like if you were to call the OPP because of a noise complaint, generally that has resolved before the OPP even gets to your house. Like they've already gone to bed.
Right, unless we face the fact, the LPP, and they're so taxed that they're not coming, so.
Right. And in Ramara, they have Ramara Township, that's how they deal with it, they post the names on the township's website. And they were in part of our training session, and when asked if people abused knowing that information publicly, they did have one occurrence out of 280. Where they were getting calls for not proper reasoning, so they had to deal with that as well.
Right.
The saying wasn't perfect.
Two have pretty standard, clauses are 211 and 212, so no short-term rental will be rented more than 28 days per stay. Again, this is about making sure that we do have those long-term housing stock. We don't have rentals in Bonneville. We do have a housing shortage. So that 28 days is managing that. And then there's the one for the 150 calendar days per year. So this ensures that the residential use is maintained and the character of the neighborhood is 150 days maximum. And of course, it does discourage that. I mean, not that we want to necessarily discourage the commercial, but we do want to make this more about promoting Bonneville and creating that economic development. So having it that it's only rented 150 days a year kind of satisfies that balance between the neighbor who doesn't want the short-term rental, but the person who needs to have a short-term rental.
So the license is from, so if the license is from January 1st to December 31st, that's your year. Then you have 150 days, but your 150 days may be broken. You're going to rent the first 3 months. Then you're going to not rent it for that period of time. And then say the last 3 months or whatever it is, it's not consecutive like the 28 days is. So, but that license is good for the entire year when you purchase it.
How is that gonna be tracked?
So the bylaw does require that there's a registry that's kept, and it's a very basic generic registry, so it would just be how many guests, the dates that they were there, like to from. So we can make sure it's not 28 days and then that there's not 150 days, and that the owner is responsible to give that to us.
So how are
I
you
mean, we're
going to
trusting
monitor
that
that?
people will be honest.
How would you monitor that?
It
We're-
had
If we
municipal
got
accommodation
60
tax.
people, 60 places, 60 rental.
Yeah, I think that we have to realize that people truly want to be good people and that they will self-govern.
And they want to keep their license.
Yes.
Okay, don't want to get caught cheating the system, you'll never get a license. You'll disqualify yourself from getting future licenses if you get caught cheating the system.
And if it really does get out of hand, I'm sure a neighbor is going to. A neighbor complains about cars and dogs and.
Well, that,
We'll
yeah.
complain about this. Again, so 2.13 is that 50, the 50 short-term rental licenses. We've kind of discussed all of that. There's the class A, the class B, the class C. The class C being those truly commercial where they don't actually, like, there's no residential use at all. So this is the only part in, I think that. In the residential zones that we have right now, so in every zone that we have right now, you can have a residential use. But in most of the, because our bylaw is not under planning act, it's under municipal act or licensing. But we do not allow commercial use within. Within the residential uses like RLS or R1 or R2, which would be more in the hamlets. So for commercial, we would have to like rezone the property.
Okay, with the provisions changing, with, like how we're gonna be issuing these out, like one per person at a time, could we not collapse class A and B? Is there a difference at this point? Like it would just be, If I look at the definitions, I don't know that there are any, it's helpful at all, because we've already got it defined as to how. It would just be class A and class,
Move C to B.
yeah, move C to B. Just wondering if it's redundant, that's all.
Yeah, I think they're basically the. Yes, we keep all the components of them, like in class A, it still says what a short-term rental is with one bedroom, may rent up to 4 other bedrooms, we wanna make sure that we're still saying those 4 if you're renting my bedroom, so we'd still wanna make that. We could,
Yeah.
yeah, we can look at that tonight.
I just think it makes sense that if, like, if we do get to the point where it's competitive to try and get one of the 50 licenses. I don't care if it's a class A or class B right now, I do care the difference between what it would be combined as that and C.
Right.
I don't want the corporations at the first crack, I do want our residents who might have 2 pieces of property.
Right.
Like, that's fine to me, to be honest. With 2 arms. I'm assuming it's supposed to stay.
Okay, so we can look at that.
We may have to relook at 3.14 renewing licenses.
Right, especially given the
Regardless of
residential
class,
use,
right?
yes.
Maybe that's where.
Do we just need to remove it?
We do want to encourage people that have already had a license and would, and follow the rules, that they get first crack at the next round.
And how would you determine that?
We would know, like, if there's contraventions against someone's licensing, or like it would be tracked. We just want to ensure that. You know,
The people
kind of
that-
rewarding, right?
Right.
You
Yeah.
did your thing.
So maybe I'm reading this wrong, I should read it slower, because I think that's what it says, no,
Yeah.
that have been issued and have not had any contraventions to the bylaw in the previous year will be given. I don't know if precedent is the right word.
Yes.
And,
Right.
yeah, it's not like priority, to renew license the following year regardless of license class. I still think that's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
We would still have class A, B.
Right.
Yeah, okay. So the licensing requirements, again, everyone, the day that we pass this, would still have to follow all of the components in here, all of the requirements. So the application form, it includes the site plan of the premises, the the interior floor plan of the dwelling. And it's labeled with interior rooms, including the guest rooms, location of fire extinguishers, smoke alarms, and CO detectors. A completed dedicated responsible person consent and acknowledgement form. And a completed short-term rental inspection form is provided by the township, so there is a doc of one in here on Schedule G, so they would have to fill that out. The owner themselves, when they're applying, they fill that out, and then that would be used as the inspection. And then a copy of the transfer deed or property identification and providing evidence of the ownership to make sure that they're not licensing the tenant without the owner's permission. Proof that the applicant is at least 18 years old. So we know that they can enter into contracts, and name and contact information of the owner and agent or dedicated responsible person who can be readily contacted and respond to emergency or contravention of any township bylaws. Again, within that 45 minutes, that has to be included. The certificate of insurance demonstrating compliance with the insurance requirements. We are changing this down to that 2 million, that's still in there. It's highlighted just so that we know that that's one of the sections we have to go back to fix, because it'll be proof that the applicant, if a corporation, is legally entitled to conduct business in Ontario. In case of the applicant being a partner, the names and addresses of each member of the partnership, as well as the name under which the partnership intends to carry on business. In the case of the applicant or agent acting on behalf of the owner, written authority is required. And then for any short-term rental on a septic system, the applicant will be required to provide proof in the form of a valid permit of record from the North Bay Meadow Conservation Authority. Now, we do have homes, I think we've had this discussion, that we do have homes that are older than when the North Bay Meadow Conservation started to issue the septics in Bonfield. But prior to that, it was the MOE, so we're asking for that letter to say that there's no outstanding work orders, or that there's no issues with the septic. And then this is when required, because I think we're not into the inspection piece yet. And maybe that's where that conversation can happen, but the inspections are, like there's different occupancy requirements if it's a full-time residential use, or if there's a seasonal use. If it's a property has occupancy based on seasonal use, there's a different occupancy schedule in there. So some of them may not even have a proper, like a septic, they may just have a class 1 outhouse. So that will come into there as well, but there still has to be something to say that there's no issue.
We're going to speak to the Conservation Authority to see what can happen with them. In
Well, I think-
coordination of that.
And I think everybody's pushing them for letters forward, so I think you're gonna probably see down the road, they're gonna wanna do dye tests, especially on the water. To
Right.
see if your septic is leaching, I would think, because they do that on Trout Lake now.
Yeah, they have a contract with North Bay for that.
Yeah, so anyways,
And yeah, I think the initial conversation with them should be like, what is reasonable, because we don't want to flood them with. Nuisance, it's like everybody going to their doctor for a doctor's note, like, it's kind of like, okay, how do we,
We all
what can they
have COVID.
produce at low cost, low friction, low. You know, what I mean, like, what services can they provide? That's easy for the homeowner. Okay.
And they are pretty good. I mean, I know that they've been out twice this year already, just to look at a property when there's been complaints. There've been 2 properties that we've had complaints against, and they have done an inspection, so. They're generally pretty good. So under section 4.2, another section is upon receipt of the completed application for a new license with all the required documentation and the required fee, the license issuer will contact the applicant to schedule the necessary inspections to satisfy the township. Once I get into the Schedule D, I'll chat about that. And then upon receipt of a completed application for, the inspection shall include but not be limited to the items shown on Schedule D. And I think that we've had part of that discussion, that but not limited to would be removed.
Mhm.
Can I ask
And-
something else? Sorry?
Of course.
So when we issue that license, we issue it to the individual, to the owner of the property, right?
Mhm.
So say they decide 6 months down the road, they're going to sell a property. What happens to that license? So they list it and they say that it's a short-term rental, it's a home that has short-term rental. What happens to that license?
The licenses are non-transferable.
They're.
They're
You
non.
can't transfer them.
No.
So at that point, there's no short-term rental home when they sell
Right,
Right.
the use is still permitted, so I mean. A long time ago,
it.
people,
Okay, the use is still
the
permitted.
use is still
yeah.
permitted, but the new owner would have to fill in the
Go get the
application
License.
to say that they are going to.
this is where you would jump in on the list, you know how you were sitting at 51? Yeah, you're at 50.
Right, sure.
It's also a corporation, but very quickly, just be like, I will buy your home, because I want your license, right?
Yeah, the guy that was selling it wouldn't like it maybe though. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I hear what you're saying, but they're not transferable, because everybody new coming in and have to.
Yeah. but the
Acknowledge
use-
the
The
application.
use is still there.
Right,
Use
The
is
only
different.
thing, the new person would have to apply for the certificate or the license, yeah.
They would have to get the insurance in their name, they would have to, yeah, it cannot be transferred.
Thank you. That's good. So, 2.4, 4.2.4, during the inspection process for the purpose of determining the license eligibility, all relevant departments of the township may provide comment on any known matters that would assist in determining the license eligibility. And this might come into the planning, it might come into public works where we know that there's no entrance permit, there's a problem, there's something, so it could be anyone. We just want to make sure that the property is safe for everybody. So we would be allowed to. And I think the rest was fine, and then 4.3.7, the license insurer may refuse to issue or renew a license or revoke or suspend a license as per Schedule A of the bylaw. Or where the short-term rental code of conduct has been violated at this premise. So again, we're going to have the dedicated responsible person, we'll know when they're, if it escalates to bylaw, if it escalates to OPP and there's continuous infractions, then we'll know that. The septic system requirements are not met. The property does not conform with applicable federal or provincial law and regulations or township laws. But not limited to zoning, property standards, and the building code require. Protection and Prevention Act, again, these are just the health and safety considerations that we want to make sure are included. That protects the municipality, the owner, and the person renting. So where, for fees and cost recovery, fees shall be levied in accordance with Schedule B, and if we flip to Schedule B right now, because I think I heard. So I heard that, we may, in, the bylaw only has a lump sum, but, we have broken that down, in a different section and a different report that we presented before on what those fees consist of. So there's inspection fees, there's the processing fees, and there's the, enforcement and just the fees that the municipality is gonna have to bear. And I've heard that you may want to consider reducing some of those inspection fees. That would reduce it down to $1,200. So there would be multiple inspections. First inspection is at $150, but from the conversation that maybe we want to have one of those fees, and it's after the first inspection, we will just eat those costs as part of the other.
Well,
Right, but the $150 is included in the first the first inspection is, well, all inspections are
Yes.
included in $1,200, right?
up to 3 inspections,
Up
then
to
you're,
3.
then we're not, you're not getting your license.
So if you fail the first, fail the second, fail the third. Well, we're not gonna hold the license for you for a year, we're gonna move on to somebody else who can pass it.
Yeah, and you can try again next year after you
Yeah.
figure out your stuff. Figure out whatever problems you have.
I think member Neri made a good point, like if this is on the website
Right.
and the inspection list is there.
You know what.
Before
to
you come in,
expect.
make sure you gotta have your stair rails are okay, that's those health and safety components of the inspection.
Right.
And perhaps we can get Mike to speak to kind of what some of that inspection might, is he still on?
Okay,
Maybe
Mike,
I'll
are you
speak at the
here?
end here.
Yes, I am, yeah.
Perfect.
So, I think I'm jumping to Schedule B at this point. which
Yeah,
is
but we
that
can,
inspection.
okay, let's go to Schedule B. Yeah.
So
It's mine.
really just trying to scope out what that inspection would look like. Mike, hoping you can maybe speak to that a little bit about the health and safety components of it and really where the focus from the municipality would be.
So the inspection mainly focuses on light safety components, wood stoves, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, stairs, lighting outside, egress windows and basements, where there's bedrooms, stuff like that. So it's not, a home that was built a while ago doesn't have to conform to today's building code, but the occupancy standards are pretty much the same throughout. So that's mostly what I'll be looking at.
And we're gonna develop a checklist that'll be fully transparent for these are the things we're looking at and you either comply or you don't, and we'll give rationale as to why. Like I'm assuming, Mike, as you're doing your inspection, if you walk in and you see that, the third stair going up that somebody's landing is missing, well, they're gonna fail because of it, but you'll point out you need to fix this stair tread, right?
Yes, of course, yeah,
Right.
and I'll help out, give as much information as I can for them to comply with the code,
Right, okay.
so they can get their license, of course.
Were all categories 1,200?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I understood.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
The yearly license would be 1,200.
I think we also need to address the. If this bylaw was to pass, like it's has to be sent back to the lawyer, et cetera. We had that one provision that for 2024, it was gonna be half the price. Would this bylaw be? Start in 2025?
No, because I think we have the provision of, that we're gonna grandfather everybody from the time we start a bylaw. Like, how many people are gonna be rushing in to say, hey, listen, I'm gonna hang a shingle. I'm gonna put something on Airbnb, I'll charge them $100. And then my foot's in the door.
Right.
I don't, how long do you leave that window open if we're months and months and months, like. I get, well, there's a process to go through, but I think we started, and we.
This year
What's the
we
word?
use the fee.
Yeah, like we. Prorate, thank you, we prorate the fees to. Make it fair for this year, for sure.
For this year, yeah, for this year, and then it gets us through the year.
And what do you say?
Well, so
how
it's
much
essentially
is
$100.
They're
a
just gonna
month.
prorate it, so
So-
by the time this
Yeah, true.
bylaw
$100 a
passes,
month.
say in September. Then you only got those few months, so it'll be prorated down to like, $400.
Okay.
And I'll be honest, I don't think it's a straight up prorate either. If we pass this in September. And a new one comes out in December. The renters will have lost their prime season, so like, we're gonna charge them.
We have to figure that out.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
I think it's not a straight up day over day prorate, it's probably pretty substantially reduced depending on how long it takes us to get this out, because. People won't be able to make it.
And the license is a yearly license from a certain date that we provided
Calendar
to
year.
that date, yeah.
Yeah.
Cause we talked before about doing it when they apply. But we're not tracking.
Too confusing, then will get too confusing.
So December 31st to January.
January 1st, December 31st.
If you happen to apply in November. Your license isn't gonna be up for very long, right? So.
Yeah, it's only being prorated for this year.
Yeah, not every year after that.
But the year is January 1st to December 31st.
Right.
Correct.
Not when you get it.
No,
And if you get it in the middle of the year, then are we prorating that one?
I don't think so, not moving forward. I think we do this year. To be fair to all of our existing, but I think if you decide you wanna. Start an Airbnb in September, 3 years from now. It's a $1,200 fee and you go through the process, or you decide you're just gonna apply for January 1st start instead of.
Yeah, whatever makes sense.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
I think it gets too messy if we start prorating everything, because we're gonna get people that are, if they don't rent in the winter and it's only the summer, they're gonna come in and wanna pay a prorated amount, even though we're going through the same amount of work to get them the license. If they're only applying in May. Cause they don't wanna pay the full 1,200. That's-
Right.
I think the only other thing, that it's not specific in the bylaw, but we have. Had the advice, for private roads, again, it goes back to residential use is residential use. And that we should not regulate on private roads, so if somebody does have a short-term rental on a private road, it's still considered a residential use, and we don't have jurisdiction. The fees we're collecting are cost recovery for short-term rental use, not for anything else other than that bylaw. So I don't think that we can really address anything on the private road issue.
Yeah, I fully agree. I don't think we can either. The only thing I would like, and maybe it's consultations that we can have with community members is. Or people that currently do short-term rentals, how do we work with them to ensure? What's reasonable to make sure that the renters know that it's a private road? Cause it is concerning that somebody coming up from down south wouldn't know. That it could potentially have restricted services. It's just a knowledge thing. Like, how do we make sure that the homeowner is being responsible enough to tell their potential renter? Hey, listen, it's private road.
Might not get plowed.
You might not get an ambulance if it hasn't been plowed, or you might not get right? So it's just a transparency.
Or,
Yeah, we have no control. of
it's
that.
not even like, the services, like. your day to leave and the road isn't plowed because it's a private road. It gets done when it gets done. It's not like a municipal road.
Yeah.
And I think we've only found one case law.
Sioux Narrows, yes, there was a gentleman in Sioux Narrows. That took it to the OLT because they were going to deny him the ability to have a short-term rental on a private road. Unfortunately, the end result in that OLT case was that they weren't able to prove if it was all the way across a private road. There was probably a complication with a driveway existing on private lands. And it's not the OLT's responsibility to go through registry. However, within that case, it did speak to that it's still the same use, the same residential use was permitted as a home. It doesn't create more traffic. It creates strange traffic, if you know what I mean, not different amount of traffic,
Yeah,
right?
no, yeah, it's unfortunate you didn't get straight legal precedence from.
Yeah, we
I
did
think-
it. It did
I
end up
think the
well.
conversation earlier, which made a good point, was, I think we just, like, I think you were making the point where. You know, how do we don't want to restrict off the road, but what we want to do is make sure people are aware, right?
Exactly, but I don't, and I feel that that's the renters. Or the people that rent to ensure that the people know where they're coming to. Because there are a lot of private roads back there that possibly the emergency vehicles can't make it in there. That's unless we notify everybody, I don't think we should just notify the people that are renting privately. And I feel that that's the person that's renting, that's their responsibility to let the people know where they're coming. And because I don't think if we're going to rent the people or notify the people that are renting, then are we putting ourselves in a bad spot so that we have to notify everybody? They may not even have any renters on that road, but if you can't get in and the emergency vehicles can't get in, and I know some spots where it's very difficult for the big trucks to get in there, we should be notifying everybody then. Otherwise, I don't think that's our responsibility. They bought on a private road, they live on a private.
Yeah.
That's just my feeling about it.
I don't disagree, although I think there's a better chance somebody who's living on that road and owns a property on the road would know. It's far more probable that they would know other than somebody coming in a short-term rentals, unless it's actually communicated with them, so. Anyways, all of that to say, I don't know how we can support that communication happening, but.
Most people that are wanting to do this, I feel it's probably very responsible.
I think so.
Anyways,
Yeah,
I'm gonna take people in that.
I think they're responsible, but they might forget little things, right? So having some sort of a template. Again, a family coming up and renting a house. If they live in a city and they're used to city amenities, they're not gonna understand that. You know, maybe your road doesn't get plowed, an ambulance doesn't come. You have young kids, if you have somebody that's older and maybe has some health issues like that, they need to understand that. Before they get there, if tragedy happened. I don't want the township being liable for something because we didn't cross our T's and dot our I's, right? The family came up and a kid slipped and fell and needed an ambulance and called an ambulance and they couldn't get there and nothing could happen. They couldn't get help. Now they're gonna look at suing anybody that they can.
No, but on the other hand, if you say it that way, then right now, say one of our trucks can't get in and there's somebody that needs the emergency back there.
Yeah.
And we haven't identified anybody, is that putting the responsibility on the municipality?
So I think.
Or is it the people that live back there?
So I think the only thing that's different is we're issuing a license for that address.
I realize that, but I think then we should be notifying everybody back there on the private roads. If our emergency vehicles can't get in here, then you may not have emergency.
What is the cost of a mailer? Let's do that.
And we can put in it, we can put it in the newsletter,
Put it on that checklist that Mike's gonna go through.
yeah, we can do
Or,
that,
you know, the checklist for the licensing. Have that on the checklist.
yeah.
Yeah,
Must
to
say-
make sure that make sure your tenants are aware of where they
To
are.
limited service
you know.
road.
Yeah,
Well, and I
And-
mean,
and
to the
we
point of,
can-
sorry. To the point of don't park on the grass, cause gosh knows you might be on top of a septic. Listen, there are, like, it should be a yes or no question of potable water. Lots of properties have potable water. There are some that don't have potable water. And it's important somebody from the city who's used to having city water know. And again, it's not necessarily a deal breaker. If it's a seasonal property that you're just gonna come and you're gonna, there's a shower, but don't drink the water. As long as somebody knows that, they might be totally fine to still rent it, but it's important that for somebody to know that it's coming up. Cause when I look at some of the properties that we have in Calvin that are being rented out. Not sure they're communicating, Yeah,
maybe like you say, Jason, maybe a checklist. We could do a checklist that might help, just suggestions, not mandatory or anything. This might be a suggested checklist that you look at, and this might be something you want to let your tenants know.
and maybe we have the. As part of the license fee, they fill out, do you have potable water? Yes, and we can put that profile, we can help advertise, we can put it on our website. Here's the profile of all of our different Airbnbs or our short-term rentals, and with their profile, like, hey, listen, here, they've got 4 bedrooms and this and that, as filled out by the. But then it's a way, is it on a private road? Yes or no, if it's on a private road, then it just says, you know, please be aware that, yeah. If it's a no, then.
They're generally, they're generally, on most websites, it's on the mapping system through CGIS. So you're able to pull up the map and it'll locate
Yeah,
each,
just
short-term rental.
happy to work with the homeowner on it. It's probably really easy for them to answer the yes, no.
Yeah.
And let's just help out, like, we're gonna be putting stuff about Airbnbs and the responsible owners. Let's put positive things there. Too, right? And here's all the great stuff.
And certainly
Okay.
a list
They
like
put
that would
5-star
be
renter.
helpful.
We become our own Airbnb.
I'll connect with legal just to make sure, what that does for our, risk, but. We'll draft something up.
Yeah.
Let him evaluate it.
Yeah, something, idea, like, I mean, we're just spitballing ideas, it's plan, but yeah. We'd be open to feedback from the public on that too after. Like from those that rent, like what worked, like.
And I think that covers everything that was in the bylaw based on the comments and concerns and. That we heard from our legal, if everybody's comfortable with those. Think I touched everything, have I missed?
No, I think we touched, the public consultation.
All right. So that'd be number 8, resolution, be considered not number 8.
There's no correction for it.
Okay, correspondence, done, adjournment. Moved by Featherstone, second by Corbett, that this meeting be adjourned at
9:17.
9:17, all in favor? Carried.
Thanks, Mike, I'll let you go now.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Good night, Mike.
Bye.
Bye.